Hi, this is a video on the SCD diet. The SCD diet is actually fairly simple to understand. It all revolves around candida, which is yeast. And the concept is this. Yeast enters into the stomach, it grows and it proliferates. Now, the reason why that happens, it's believed because of the use of antibiotics on their kids when they're young. Especially if your kids had a lot of ear infections. They feel that's why ear infections and stuff like that is linked to autism because of this heavy antibiotic use. And what antibiotics do is they kill all the bacteria in the gut. Now, when you've killed all the bacteria in the gut, the good and the bad, yeast can just, flourish. That's why women are always recommended to, if they're on antibiotics, to eat yogurt, to put the good stuff back in there to avoid yeast issues. So, if you have a situation in a child where yeast is really growing badly, and for some reason with our children it seems that, it just keeps on growing, it attaches itself to the stomach lining. And it's believed that it eats microscopic holes. The yeast actually feeds off the stomach lining. They're the holes I was talking about in the GFCF video that allow the food to pass through. So the GFCF diet takes away the foods that pass through the holes. What the SCD diet does, it eliminates the foods that the yeast are living off of. Now here's how the yeast live off of foods. When, as before I said, it's all about breaking down the foods. You want to break down the foods. Well, different foods, types of foods, break down at different rates of speed. So a potato is going to take a while to break down in your stomach. And, something else might break down like that. Like chicken breaks down very quickly. The longer the food is in the stomach, the longer the yeast have to feed off of that. They're feeding off of your food and taking its nutrients, by the way. So if the SCD diet says fine, then what we'll do is eliminate all the foods that take a long time for the stomach to break down. You'll only eat foods that your body will digest quickly. You get all the nutrients, the yeast doesn't. The yeast starves and dies. That's the concept behind it. The yeast will die. It's a very simple diet. The specific carbohydrate diet, SCD, because you're only allowed specific carbohydrates. So you have a list of foods you can eat. Well, actually a bigger list of foods you can't eat, and then you have this whole list of types of foods you can eat. Now, you take the list of foods that you can eat, and you cross off anything that the GFCF diet says you can't eat. So that way you're GFCF legal on the SCD diet. Now, you still get plenty of foods, and I'll get into that later too. So you're starving off the yeast by eliminating certain types of food. That's all this diet is. Now, that's why once you get the GFCF diet down for a few months, you can start this diet. You're used to a restrictive diet. You're in the flow of things with that. And then you would add this on. It's a little bit more difficult than a GFCF diet, but it's a lot harder to start the GFCF diet for the first time than it is to move from the GFCF to becoming SCD also. It's a lot harder, that initial one. Now, what happens when you starve off the yeast? Well, let me say this first. The yeast themselves release these toxins or chemicals or whatever, but they themselves cause a child to also be in a foggy state. So you want to get rid of them, and you'll see more clarity. Now, when you kill the yeast, when the yeast dies, when the yeast dies, they release a toxin. And those toxins, when you first go into SCD diet, oftentimes will be released in abundance. And they can make your child have a condition called yeast die-off. And this is actually confirmation that the diet's working, but it's still tough to get through. There's two types, and for 7 days, Jake laid on the floor with the flu-like symptoms. For more like 5 days. That's the first type. The first type of yeast die-off usually lasts between 2 and 7 days. The child gets sweats, they get a fever, they're sluggish, lethargic, they're not hungry. And for Jake, he had like a, a metallic smell to him, almost like an alcohol type smell. He laid on the floor, he didn't eat, he didn't want to do anything. And I knew it was coming because I read about it, but it's still tough to get through. Now, but once he started feeling better and he started coming back to life, the clarity that is there from the week before it wasn't there. It's an amazing increase in clarity. Not so much as what we saw with the GFCF diet, but still absolutely undeniable and noticeable. No doubt about it. Now, another type of die-off, yeast die-off, is when a child will, for like almost a month's time, become very aggressive, become very uncontrollable, unruly. That's a very tough yeast die-off to get through. There was a parent, a very smart lady, and I was trying to convince her to go on a diet. Actually, I wasn't trying to convince her. She was already going to go on a diet. And I convinced her, yeah, go ahead and do it. Encouraged her, I should say. So she did it. 2 weeks later, she calls me and she goes, I can't take it. I'm getting ready to go into an insane asylum. The kid is bouncing off the walls. He's doing this. I can't control him. This is horrible, right? So I never heard of that, but I'm not an expert in the SCD diet. So I just knew what I knew. So I went on the computer and I started reading back the symptoms, and I found that this is a type of die-off. And I'm like, he's doing this. And she's like, oh my God, yes, okay, this is the yeast die-off. How long does this last? And I said, it says it lasts like a month. I said, yellow mucusy poop that the kids will often have. I never said autism was beautiful. Yellow mucusy poop. And she goes, oh my God. She goes, I called my husband yesterday. That's exactly what happened. So you see, when you're told ahead of time this is going to happen, and it happens, that tells you the yeast is dying off and this is a good diet. She went through it for a whole month, and then she called me back at the end of the month and she goes, oh my God, my child came out of it and their head is so clear now. This is an amazing diet. She goes, you're an angel and this is a miracle. And I'm like, no, I'm not an angel. Somebody told me about this diet and I tried it and it worked. It worked for them, now it worked for me, now it worked for you. And she does. Now she goes around and she tells people, you have to try this diet. Now, would she tell people you have to try this diet if after a month of hell and yellow poop, she saw okay results? They were okay. You would have to see something pretty amazing to convince you that that was worth it. And she did. So it's not real hard of a diet to start once you start the GFC, once you've done the GFCF diet. And you continue on with the GFCF diet. You can't start both diets together. You just can't. And I wouldn't start the SCD diet before the GFCF diet. I wouldn't do that either. I would do the GFCF diet first and the SCD diet. Now, if you go ahead and do the SCD diet and you don't see any progress in a month and you really don't see any behavior change, good or bad, I would go off the diet. Yeast might not be an issue, but you might, if you still think yeast might be an issue, there are drugs you can use, but you'd have to go to a doctor for them. And then you can make a game plan with him. Now, this is a diet, and it's a change in their diet, so obviously you should consult a nutritionist and you should consult a doctor. I didn't, but that's me, so don't sue me if something happens, okay? Look into it. Look into every diet before you try it. I'm going to post the information where to look. Now, one quick word. There is a message board that you can go on and find out about this diet and the GFCF diet. I don't recommend you go on them for the first few weeks at least, because there is such a wealth of information there, but it is overwhelming. They get into technical things that will make you think this diet is much harder than it is. I'm going to show you a website, like the website, and the book. Now, the diet actually was invented for celiac disease, but the autism community picked up on this and it's been wonders. Definitely a big, big reason why Jake gained a lot of clarity for us. So give it a shot, and if you've done this diet and had great results, please leave comments so people can see. And any information you got to add onto this, leave it so people can see, so they can know what to expect from trying this diet and all that. All right, thanks a lot and good luck. Take it easy.